The people of Gaza have formed an unholy alliance with the most unexpected people in the world, the American left. To those of us with the capacity for rational thought, this teaming of so-called progressives and radical Islamists might seem like it makes no sense. The progressive movement spends its time fighting for female parity and gender equality, while under Sharia law, women are about as much of a people as your dog or a goat, and gays are castrated and thrown off rooftops to their death. It would seem that the two sides have little in common. Sure, hatred of Jews among progressives has been rising for years, and Islam has never been a fan of bagels and lox, but the thing that brought these two sides together isn't actually about Israel at all. The common thread is the hatred of America. Islamists hate the United States because they think it represents a satanic moral failure that looks to reach out and corrupt the world by exporting our hegemonic culture, and they look to fight us through jihad. The progressives hate America because America has a nasty and mean history, and they believe the only way to cure it is to turn every American into some sort of septum-pierced weirdo who contributes nothing to society. The progressive left is fighting for a group that would happily murder them with glee. But we can't blame them for not understanding that. I mean, after all, they only have an Ivy League education. I'm Tyler Chrestman. Welcome to the Chrestman Conversation. Okay, in case it wasn't clear in the intro, today we are going to be talking about what happens, or what has happened, on college campuses around the United States, and a little more broadly about protests, Israel, Islam, all the fun things that we like to talk about here on the Chrestman Conversation. For those of you that live in a box or don't watch the news, because, let's be honest, it's a waste of time, you may have missed a story about what's going on across the country. There have been protests on major college campuses around the country. We had some here in St. Louis. WashU and SLU both had protests. There were big ones in UCLA, and the big one up at NYU and Columbia have garnered a lot of news attention. And it kind of reminds me of the Black Lives Matter riots of 2020, when you had that CNN chyron that read fiery but mostly peaceful. People are pretending that these have been peaceful protests. They have not been peaceful protests. There have been calls for genocide against the Jews. There have been physical violence. There has been intimidation. They actually, in some of these cases, in some of the campuses, they have told Jewish students that they should not come to class. This is the administration of the building has told Jewish students that they should be careful and not come to class or protect themselves. And this has been going on for a couple weeks now. And it's important to remember that what these people are protesting, because this has very little to do with the Palestinians. Now, I don't think most of the protesters who are participating, most of these college kids, are Hamasniks. I don't think they actually understand Hamas. I don't think they understand anything at all. I think they're a bunch of idiots. But I'm going to give them the benefit of the doubt and say they're not actually evil. They're just stupid. They are useful idiots, which is fine because young people are stupid. When I was young, I was stupid. When you were young, you were stupid. And these kids are young and they're stupid. Now, the fact that you go to an Ivy League school doesn't mean you're not stupid. It means you have a high IQ and are also dumb. That's what it means, because young people don't know anything. They think they do. When I was 21, I thought I knew a lot of things. The things I believed when I'm 21 that I now believe at 33 are completely different. And if you aren't the same way, then you wasted a decade of your life. Everyone, just real quick. Winnie's on my lap. She wants to say hi. Hello. So if you've wasted a decade of your life and you haven't grown in your beliefs or your ideas or just as a person, then you are failing at life. That's just the way it is. You should always be reevaluating, reexamining your ideas and looking to grow. That's what these people will do, hopefully, and they will grow out of this silly hatred of Israel and supporting terrorist nonsense, because most of these people, here's the mistake that's been made. If you say, which is a totally rational position, if you say that I am concerned about the treatment of the Palestinians and I don't want innocent people to die in a war needlessly, and I think Israel has been too aggressive, or I think that they've killed too many, blah, blah, blah. Okay, this is an argument you can have. If you accuse Israel of committing a genocide, you are mistaken, misinformed, or being a bad person and just lying. It's one of those things. Israel is not committing a genocide. The Palestinians have grown 5 times their number in the last 50 years. If Israel is committing a genocide against the Palestinians, they're doing the worst job in the history of the world. They say up to 30,000 people may have died in Gaza since this war started. And it's important to remember, it is a war. We killed 100,000 German civilians in World War II, and nobody wants to talk about how immoral we were because we were fighting bad people. Israel is fighting bad people. And if you're on the side of the innocent civilians, well, I'm on your side. I don't want innocent civilians to die. The question is, what does an innocent civilian look like in Gaza? Because the 30,000 number that we're getting, most of those people are not going to be innocent women and children, scholars, the youth, the future of the world. That's not who we're talking about. We're talking about people who want to kill Jews and were killed in turn. That's what we're talking about. And so most people don't understand this. Those numbers come straight from Hamas, which is a terrorist organization, a genocidal terrorist organization. So the protesters who are out there supporting Hamas, openly supporting Hamas, wearing the neckerchief, the terrorist scarf, these people, they're idiots. And they're also being bad people, because when you wear that scarf, well, you're not supporting the Palestinians. That is the scarf of a terrorist organization that is hell-bent on genociding all the Jews. So when you claim to be anti-genocide and you wear the keffiyeh, the neck scarf of Hamas, you are actually on the side of the people who want to commit genocide. But that's the point that I'm trying to make right now. These people are dumb. Most of the protesters on college campuses are dumb because they're young and they don't understand the Middle East. They don't understand the conflict. I will never pretend to know everything about Middle Eastern politics, but I will say this. I am more well-informed than most people on this particular subject because I've actually done quite a bit of reading about it. As you see, we always have the bookcase here behind me over, I don't know which one of these shelves. I think the one right behind me. I've got a couple of books. I read Benjamin Netanyahu's books. I read 2 of them. I read the Alan Dershowitz book, The Case for Israel, the Dennis Prager's book. I've read the history, the sort of the what do they call it? The unbiased history of the Middle East, which just describes the conflicts without trying to pick sides. I understand what has been going on in that region a little bit better than most people. Okay, I'm not going to say everybody because obviously that's not true. But I understand the conflict. These people don't understand anything. And we're going to demonstrate that. I actually have, these people are campaigning for jihad. And they don't understand that. And they don't understand that the people they're on the side for, like I said in the intro, the people they're on the side for would murder them. The Queers for Palestine people, you couldn't be more idiotic than to be a queer for Palestine. Do you want Palestine here in the United States? The answer is no. They kill queer people in Palestine. We could pull up the article. Just 2 years ago, there was a big article about this man. I forget his name, Abu Marain, something like that. He was beheaded in the West Bank, which is Palestine. He was beheaded for being gay. That was just 2 years ago. There's a big article. It's a big humanitarian piece because they arrested him. They said they're going to kill him. The world said don't kill him, and they beheaded him for being gay. And you're on their side right now. Remember that. There are pride parades in Israel, and you are on the side of the people who behead gay people for being gay. Just remember that. And I want to talk, we're talking about protesters being dumb. This is going to be great. I just want you to, for a moment, appreciate how great these videos are. I have 2 videos I want to show you, which when I'm talking about protesters being dumb, this is what I mean.
And what would you say is the main goal with tonight's protest?
I think the goal is just showing our support for Palestine and demanding that NYU stops. I honestly don't know all what NYU's doing.
Is there something that NYU's doing?
I really don't know. I'm pretty sure they're... Do you know what NYU's doing? About what? About Israel. Why are we protesting here?
Palestine will be free!
I wish I was more educated. I'm not either. I came from Columbia. I was there up at Columbia, and we came down. They said NYU students needed our support. So I came down. I heard there's lots of cops. Some people were saying it was getting dangerous earlier. I'm not sure if that's true, but I wanted to come and show my support.
Okay, so these people are just, they are the prime example of what I'm talking about. You have people who are out there in the streets who don't even know what they're protesting, but they're protesting because they're young and they're cool and they want to show their support and they want to be virtuous. And how are you virtuous? Well, you got to protest something. You have to be out there protesting, and they don't know what they're protesting. What is NYU doing? It's a very simple question. What is NYU doing that you're protesting? And the one girl says, I don't know. And she turns to her friend. She says, do you know what we're protesting? And her friend says, well, I wish I was more educated. And then she says, oh, me too. Yeah, I wish you both were more educated, because then you would be home and not out in the streets protesting something you don't understand on the side of terrorism. The one girl, the first girl at least, is from Columbia. So she's from Columbia, an Ivy League school. The Ivy League, the ivory tower, the great leaders of our future, the hardest schools in the country to get into. That means that this woman is supposed to be smart, but she's not smart. She's an idiot. And yes, it's because she's young. I'm sure she'll grow. I'm sure she will mature. I'm sure she will learn things. But right now, we are acting like we are supposed to listen to petulant children in the street protesting things they don't understand. Why would we do that? And these are just, you could pick any two people out of any crowd. I could have a crowd of scholars out there supporting a lowering of the income tax or a flat tax, something I support. And I could find a giant crowd of people, and I could pick out two idiots and make me look bad. So it's easy to do that with this. I'm not going to say that these people are everyone. There are some people in there. But it seems to me that every person they put in front of a camera is as dumb as the one before them. They have yet to put up a person at one of these protests that is articulating something that I say, there's a cogent, a good, well thought out, well formulated argument in support of these protests. What they have put up every time is a bunch of idiots who come across as such. Here's another example. Let's move on to another one.
It's up to them to commit to not threatening us with food insecurity, evictions, and soldiers and militarized police. That would be a great first step.
Why should the university be obligated to provide food to people who've taken over a building?
Well, first of all, we're saying that they're obligated to provide food to students who pay for a meal plan here.
But you mentioned that there was a request that food and water be brought in, unless I misunderstood.
To allow it to be brought in, I mean, well, I guess it's ultimately a question of what kind of community and obligation Columbia feels it has to its students. Do you want students to die of dehydration and starvation or get severely ill, even if they disagree with you? If the answer is no, then you should allow basic, I mean, it's crazy to say because we're on an Ivy League campus, but this is like basic humanitarian aid we're asking for. Like, could people please have a glass of water?
But they did put themselves in that, very deliberately, in that situation and in that position. So it seems like you're sort of saying, we want to be revolutionaries, we want to take over this building. Now would you please bring us food and water?
So if you couldn't hear that reporter very well, it's amazing. He says, so you're basically saying that the university, you took over a building at Columbia University. You have gone in, you are staging a protest, you occupied a building that you're not supposed to be in, that you have been asked to leave. And now you're saying to the university, would you please bring us food and water because we're going to die of dehydration in this building that you chose to occupy. And this woman has just no idea. And by the way, this woman, for those of you who are just listening to the podcast, whatever you're imagining, picture what would be a easy way for you to picture what this woman looks like? Picture what you would think of as someone you might describe as a radical feminist and that's exactly the picture that you got. She's got the weird hair and big glasses. She's wearing the terrorist neckerchief. And this woman, I was looking for her name. I can't remember her name off the top of my head, but she is basically a professional useless person. This is a person who is trying to get a PhD in Marxist studies, or looking at romantic poetry through a Marxist lens. And that is a professional useless person. That's what we're talking about. This person contributes nothing to society, but yet She is a brilliant revolutionary who is going to show us the moral failings of America, which has allowed her to basically do nothing productive for society for this whole time. And these are the people who, I'm sure if I was to probe this woman a little bit and ask some questions about her political leanings, she's going to describe herself as a socialist or an anarcho-communist or some sort of bullshit like that. And it makes complete sense, because the people who like socialism are the people who don't do work. That's who loves socialism. This woman would love socialism because she says, well, if we all work hard and then we can all share everything, wouldn't that be great? Because she's a professional useless person who doesn't work, she imagines in the utopia, the Marxist utopia, she'll be able to read her romantic poetry and be a philosopher of Marxism. But in reality, she's going to be either dead or in the fields picking scraps of potatoes up, and that's going to be her life. But she doesn't understand that because, again, she has spent her entire life, her entire adult life in academia, which is incredibly left-leaning, and for a bunch of smart people, they act really dumb. This is a prime example. I'm sure if you gave her an IQ test, it would probably surprise her how low it is, but also she thinks she's really smart. She's getting a PhD in Marxist poetry. Doesn't that make her real smart? No. It just means that you're wasting everyone's time and you've chosen to study a field that no one gives a shit about so you can get a doctorate in it. And then you can go on to teach people about your useless thing, and it perpetuates the cycle of uselessness in academia. So these are the people that they're putting up. This person's in front of the cameras. Someone told her to go out and be the spokesman, and she looks like a total moron because it is a very obvious statement that if you are a radical revolutionary, you occupy the building, you take it over, why then should Columbia University ship you food and water? Why is that their problem? If you die of dehydration, is it because Columbia University put an embargo on their own building? No, it's because you're breaking the law and you're starving yourself. There is food available aplenty in the United States. We are a great country when it comes to food. It's everywhere. Anywhere you go. The poor in this country have more of a problem with obesity than they do with hunger. And this woman thinks they're going to starve to death. They need basic humanitarian aid at Columbia University because a bunch of people who support terrorism decided to terrorize students at Columbia. And then the university should reward them for that with food and water. Like I said, these people they're not sending the brightest anymore to these universities. And you know what? Columbia got rid of their SAT. Here's what you get when you do that. You get a bunch of people who aren't going to be book smart, aren't going to be test smart. And then what you do is you have a bunch of STEM fields. So people who go into the science and math and technology, all that stuff that really makes Columbia special. And you have these people piggybacking off of them and using the prestige of Columbia to be useless, to be dumb and study things no one cares about. But then they get the prestige of a Columbia University degree, as if the Columbia Physics Department or their math department is equal to their department that studies Marxist poetry. No, one of them is useless, and one of them is physics, okay? So that's just, it's the way that these people think. They think that they are brilliant. She thinks she's brilliant, and she thinks she's moral, while she's up there the opposite of both of those things. And that's so many of the people out there protesting who don't understand the issue, don't understand they're on the side of the bad guys. And it's easy. It's easy because this is what Hamas's game plan is. Hamas's game plan is to use the world, the media, against the Jewish state to make them look bad so that the world then turns against Israel and acts as though Israel is the bad guy. And it works when you don't know anything and you have a room temperature IQ. It works really well on those people. If you think Israel is the bad guy, and this is not to say everything Israel does in the war is going to be perfect. Everything Israel does in the war is going to be exactly right. Everything Israel does is never a mistake. That is not what I'm saying. It's a war. There are going to be mistakes. There are going to be civilian casualties. There's going to be collateral damage. It's the way that these things work. But Israel goes out of their way to fight the most moral war possible, and at the same time, Hamas murders infants in their crib on purpose, not on accident, not collateral damage, not a tragic civilian casualty or a misfire, on purpose. That's what they do. That's what they are. They are rapists and murderers and bad, evil people. And if you're on their side, you are being used. You are being played because they are hitting you with the empathy card. Argumentum ad misericordiam, the appeal to pity. They are doing that to you. They are not using arguments, not using rational thought. What they are doing is they are using video, using the media to trick you into thinking Israel is bad because they are losing a war that they started. And when you step up here in your stupid terrorist neckerchief and you say Colombia is the bad guy because we broke the law and they didn't open the cafeteria doors to us. No, you're the bad person. You're being the idiot. You are the one who is breaking the law. It is not Colombia's fault. Colombia is not restricting humanitarian aid to you, you dummy. Colombia is saying you're breaking the law. We should have you arrested for trespassing, which is what they should do. The solution to this problem of protesters on the campus taking things over is to arrest them. Arrest them all. Take their stupid masks off and perp walk them in front of the cameras. That is the solution. Because if you threaten them, if you say, hey, you're not allowed to occupy the quad. You don't get to set up an encampment here and tell our university what to do. By the way, this should be every corporation and every school, anyone who's dealing with protesters. Okay? Protest is good. That this country was founded with the idea that we are going to protect the right to protest. It's in the First Amendment. You have the right to peaceably assemble. You have the right to petition the government for redress of your grievances. That is in the First Amendment. The right to protest is important. But here are a couple things that are important to understand about protest. One, that doesn't give you the right to break the law. The civil rights movement was very effective because, one, it had a very clear goal. So they would say the counter at Woolworths is segregated. That's not right. Or the buses are segregated. That's not right. And what would they do? They would boycott. They would occupy. They had sit-ins. When you had a sit-in, you were breaking the law. And this is an immoral law. I'm not going to argue. I'm not saying that. What I'm saying is they understood that. They understood that they were breaking the law. And the idea was that the United States was moral enough to recognize that arresting people for wanting to have lunch was bad. So by getting arrested and breaking that law, they were saying, this is bad. Look at how unjust this is. We look at this thing we're trying to do peacefully. We're trying to eat lunch. We are trying to ride the bus. And they said, you know what? That's good. And the law changes, as it should. It's not the same thing as blocking traffic. Blocking traffic is not the same thing. Who wants the right to block traffic? No one. No one has that right. You don't have the right to inconvenience me. Eating at the counter, riding the bus, that doesn't inconvenience me. Stopping my car on the highway, that inconveniences me. That's a safety risk for you. It's a safety risk for me. It's a safety risk for the guy in the ambulance who can't get through. Occupying the quad of a university or occupying a building is not the same. You don't have the right to occupy the dean's office in a college. It's not the same thing. If you want to protest things, there are a million ways to do it, but you don't get to break the law. The law that says you're not allowed to trespass in the dean's office is not an immoral law. That's a law about privacy and about personal property, and you don't have the right to violate those laws because you're violating the rights of another person. Not the same thing. These people think of themselves as civil rights heroes. They're fighting for the beleaguered Palestinians and the unwashed masses, and that's not true. That they're not doing that. What they're doing is breaking laws that everyone agrees should be laws. It's not like there's an argument as to whether or not the dean should have a right to privacy in his office, or that you don't have a right to camp in the quad or lock arms and block students from going to class. No one's arguing that those are rights that should exist, but those are things that are happening. The solution is to arrest them all, like Google did a couple weeks ago, and like they've now done at UCLA and Columbia, where they've sent the police in to break these protests up because they've gotten unlawful. You don't have a right to block people from class. Here's an example. This is another video I'm going to play of This gentleman's name is Eli something or other. I'll look it up in just a second. Here, watch the video first.
The entrance. We are UCLA students. I have my ID right here. I'm being blocked off, not by the security guard, but by you two. You three. Oh, look, they're making their burger while I'm going this way. This is what they do. Everybody, look at this. Look at this. I'm a UCLA student. I deserve to go here. We pay tuition. This is our school. And they're not letting me walk in. My class is over there. I want to use that entrance. Why can't they? Will you let me go in? This could be over in a second. Just let me and my friends go in to class.
We're not engaging in that.
Then you can move. Will you move?
We're not engaging in that.
Okay, we're going. We're going. I'm going in. I have my hands up. I'm not hurting them. I'm not hurting them. That's what they do. That's what they do.
So I don't... Oh, here it is. Eli... Ooh, I am not going to do a good job with that last name. T-S-I-V-E-S. Civis? I imagine the T is silent. Civis, maybe? Eli Civis. A UCLA student barred from class by a bunch of people, again, wearing the terrorist neckerchief and acting like cosplaying heroes. That's what they're doing. And so is that okay? Is anyone okay with that? Do you think we have the right to just block Jews from the building? We can all go. I saw another thing recently where they were talking about people in those little terrorist scarves were walking around throwing pennies at Jewish students wearing yarmulkes. I can't remember which campus I was from, but I saw someone did an interview where they were talking about this. They was going around campus throwing pennies at people who looked Israeli or were wearing yarmulkes. Are we okay with this? Imagine for a second that was a group of white students interlocking arms and blocking black students from their dormitories or their classes. How quickly do you think the federal government would be in there with troops saying this is not going to last? Immediately. These people have been given leeway because the Democratic Party, Joe Biden, and the Democratic Party are sympathetic to the terrorists in their own base. They're sympathetic to the Michigan Muslims who actually support this kind of behavior and actually do have some anti-Semitism in their body. And therefore, the federal government has been slow to react. These institutions should, if you're a private institution, you should be arresting them. If you're a public institution, you should be arresting them. Perp walk these people. You do not have a right to block people from classes they pay for. And if the federal government was serious about this, force these universities to do something. Say, you are not allowed to allow Jews to be discriminated against. And if you refuse to act, if you continue to allow this to happen on your campus, then we're going to pull federal funding from you. And then what you should do, if you're a Republican, for example, and you have an institution that is engaging in this behavior or trying to appease a bunch of terrorist sympathizers, let that institution rot. Pull the funding. Let it circle the drain and let them die. The entire academic institution has been corrupted by a bunch of Marxists, again, professional useless people who don't know anything, and all they do is turn out more Marxists. That's what it is. The amount of liberal bias on college campuses is unreal. Let them rot. Let these institutions go. Pull the federal funds. This, by the way, is what your student loan forgiveness, this is what it's paying for. It's paying for these kids to act like this. Is that what you want your tax money to go? The guy going down in the coal mine in West Virginia, do you think that's where his tax money should go, to give federal funds to alleviate student debt for a bunch of people who hate America and love Hamas? I don't think so. I don't want a single dollar to go to someone in that video, except for maybe Eli. You know what? I'd be happy to give Eli money because he seems like, I looked at some of Instagram stuff. I don't know him, but he looks like an interesting kid. And you know what? I'd give money to him. Anyone wearing that terrorist neckerchief, first of all, you're getting out of my university. If you want to wear that by a group a symbol of a group that openly advocates for genocide against the Jewish people, you don't have a right to an education on an American university. You just don't. Because you've demonstrated you don't have enough critical thought to understand that genocide is bad. You think genocide is bad when it's against the Palestinians. Oh, you're out in the streets protesting. But genocide against the Jewish people, well, that's more complicated. Let's talk about the history of the land. No, it's not complicated. The group that's calling for genocide is Hamas. They're the bad guys. It's not more complicated than that. I don't know. I don't remember it being like this. The anti-Semitism on the left has gotten bad in the last 10 years. You saw it in Britain with Jeremy Corbyn and the left party there, and it slowly popped up in the left in the United States. This idea, because everyone, we've talked about this a lot, because everyone on the left looks at every problem through the Marxist hierarchy of oppression. And when you're looking at it like that, Jews are doing very well for themselves, which means that they are oppressors, because that's it. There's a line. Look at here, right in the middle of the screen. There's a line, and this is the line, well, anyone over the line is an oppressor. Anyone under the line is oppressed. And wherever they draw the line, whatever metric they're using, whether it's money or income or generational wealth, whatever you want to use, if you're over the line, which in many cases the Jewish people are, because they are highly educated, they tend to be successful, they tend to outperform when you're measuring them on those metrics, then they become the oppressor class. And the ones that don't fit the narrative, they just ignore. So it's like Asians. Asians are up there, so Asians don't get talked about being discriminated against. You don't see a bunch of progressives out in the street marching for Asians who are discriminated against Harvard because they don't fit the narrative. The fact that black people from the Caribbean outperform their black counterparts who were born in America, that doesn't get talked about because it doesn't fit the narrative. That racism is the dividing factor. So you just ignore problems that don't fit. And when they look at that through the lens, it's the reason why the Jews have now been targeted the way that they have been, because on the oppressor-oppressed matrix, they are the oppressors, according to whatever statistic you're using that day. And it's gotten bad because that idea, that hierarchy, that way of thinking has grown on the left. And when it grows on the left, it leads to more anti-Semitism, which is why over the last 10, 15 years, all of a sudden now, it used to be the far right who we worried about. We said the far right, the neo-Nazis, the bald-headed people with their swastika tattoos, those are the people. But in the entire United States, there's like 6 Nazis. There's a whole bunch of progressive leftists that hate Jews, and that is way more of a threat right now. There's a horseshoe theory in politics. The far right and the far left both hate Jews. That's what they have in common. They both hate America. That's what they have in common. You think neo-Nazis love America? They do not. You think the progressive left loves America? They do not. And this has been a factor that they both have now common cause. The difference is the far right has no power. Anyone who comes out as a neo-Nazi sympathizer or a Klansman in the United States in 2024 is drummed out of civil life. No one cares. The Republicans don't want them. The Democrats certainly don't want them. But they act like the far right is the big problem. Oh, because they want to conflate MAGA. They say MAGA might as well be neo-Nazis, which is a bunch of nonsense. Meanwhile, the progressive left actually has power. People like AOC and Ilhan Omar and Rashida Tlaib, these rabid anti-Semites, they're on the cover of magazines. They're with Nancy Pelosi. They hold power in the Democratic Party. They are holding Joe Biden hostage because the far progressives don't like Joe Biden because he's too nice to Israel. They actually have power, and we're supposed to pretend that it's the far right that's the problem. It's the far left. The rabid anti-Semitism on college campuses is not far right. There's none of it that looks far right. You know what the far right was doing in these protests? They were forming a circle and putting the American flag up on campus. That's what the far right was doing, or the right in general. And so it's a problem because the left has grown into this thing that I don't recognize anymore. when I go back to 2010, not even that far. When I go back to 2016, I think 85 to 90% of the issues, I was pretty liberal, or very, very democratic, pretty liberal. In 2016, I went door to door, or 2015, I went door to door for Bernie Sanders. Okay, that's as far as you can go to the left. I did not like Hillary Clinton. I wanted Bernie Sanders to win the primary. I'm glad he didn't now, looking back, but it's interesting because I think, well, I don't feel like I have changed that much. Most of the things that I believed, I felt like the Democrats believed. But the Democrats don't believe in those things anymore. The Democrats don't believe in freedom of speech. The Democrats no longer recognize the realities of foreign policy. The Democrats, this Noam Chomsky, Howard Zinn way of thinking about the history of America and colonialism is just misplaced and misguided. And the idea that America is always the bad guy, I say, when I look through the world, I say everywhere America goes gets better. And everywhere America leaves gets worse. That doesn't seem like America's the bad guy to me. It seems like America is a force for good in the world that needs to be more places. Anyway, I'm getting off topic. We're going to leave it there for the week. As always, comment, like, share, subscribe, do all the things. It's weird, 2 videos ago, I did one about Google. I really think YouTube may have done some things. That video got no views. We're back to normal on the last one, but it was strange. I've was pretty consistent for the last couple months. Then we did that one video on Google and no traction whatsoever on YouTube, which was strange because I actually said Google did something good, but it was weird. So anyway, the likes and the comments on YouTube especially. Facebook is kind of dead. YouTube comments especially help the podcast because the more people who comment, the more people who like, the more you get shown in the algorithm. And YouTube is one that we're trying to get. Rumble is one we're trying to get. Facebook doesn't send us any money. Facebook doesn't send me anything. They don't do anything. So I don't care about Facebook, but Twitter and YouTube and Rumble are the ones. If you can like, comment, share on there, it always helps the podcast. Anyway, I'm going to leave it there for the week. I will catch you guys next Friday.